Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us for tonight's meeting of the DNC Rules and Bylaws Committee. I am Mignon Moore from the District of Columbia, and along with Jim Roosevelt from the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, we serve as co-chairs of the DNC Rules and Bylaws Committee. As we begin, please unmute and join me in reciting the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, liberty and justice for all.
I'll now turn it over to Jim for the roll call.
Well, good evening, everybody. It is great to see so many of you on the screen this evening. I'm going to now ask our parliamentarian, Helen McFadden, to call the roll. When Helen calls your name, please unmute and
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Applebaum?
Here.
Ms. Blanco?
Presente.
Ms. Brazil?
Aquí.
Mr. Brennan?
Present.
Mr. Burgos? Mr. Burgos? Ms. Cardona?
Aquí presente.
Mr. Curry?
Present.
Ms. Daughtry?
Here.
Ms. Dicey Martin?
Here.
Ms. Dowdell?
Present.
Mr. Elete?
Here.
Ms. Fowler?
Here.
Mr. Heredia?
Here.
Mr. Jones?
Here.
Ms. Kmark?
Here.
Mr. Leon?
I'm here.
Ms. Lewis?
Here.
Ms. McGarrick?
Here.
Mr. Martin?
Here.
Ms. Martinez has given her proxy to Ms. Cardona. Mr. McDonald?
Present.
Mr. McGlinchey?
Here.
Mr. Mitchell?
Here.
Mr. Ray has given his proxy to Mr. Leon.
I'm here, Helen.
Oh, okay. Ms. Ronan?
Here.
Mr. Saunders has given his proxy to Ms. Kmark. Mr. Spate has given his proxy to Ms. Blanco. Ms. Swecker?
Here.
Mr. Thompson? Mr. Thompson? Okay. Ms. Weingarten? Ms. Weingarten? Okay. Ms. Williams has given her proxy to Ms. McGarrick. You definitely have a quorum, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Helen. Yes, we do have a quorum per our charter and bylaws. A quorum is constituted by 40% of or 14 RBC members present in person or by proxy, and we clearly are exceeding that. Before we move into the business of the meeting, I'll remind members to please remain muted unless you are asked to speak. If a member would like to be recognized to make a motion or to offer comments or ask a question, please use the raise hand feature as was mentioned in our technical presentation, or send a message to Veronica through the chat function. When you raise your hand or send your message to Veronica, she will create a queue for the co-chairs. When it's your turn to speak, the co-chairs will recognize you and you may unmute yourselves. We will do our best to call on everyone in the order you seek recognition, but please be patient with us. If you have any questions or comments before we get started, please submit them in the chat to Veronica or raise your hand via Zoom, and staff will help us make sure you are recognized.
No questions.
All right, thank you, John. Seeing no questions, we will move to new business. Mignon?
Thanks, Jim. To begin new business, Jim and I would like to acknowledge one of the biggest milestones of this process. As you know, with 3,934 pledged delegates possible, a candidate must secure at least 1,968 pledged delegate votes to claim a majority. On March 12th, President Biden obtained over 2,000 delegates, surpassing the majority mark, and became the presumptive nominee of the Democratic Party. As of today, it appears that President Biden has won 2,490 delegates. I know we are all so proud to be headed into the November elections with our president as the presumptive nominee. President Biden has accomplished more in these first 3 years than many presidents have done in 2 terms. From canceling billions in student loan debt to capping prescription drug costs, growing manufacturing jobs here in America, and rebuilding our roads and bridges across the country, President Biden has proven that he has the wisdom and experience to get things done for the American people. Since our last meeting, we passed a number of important steps, our 2024 early window. You'll see impressive reports from South Carolina, Nevada, and Michigan in member materials. As you will see from all 3, we had a successful start to our window, and this process has provided us with a lot of good data to take into the 2020 cycle. Tonight, we will provide updates on delegate selection plans. Then Andy will update us on the implementation challenges, and we'll end by considering substantive amendments to Alaska and Puerto Rico's delegate selection plans, along with a technical amendment from Oklahoma. Throughout this meeting, please raise your hand or chat, Veronica, if you'd like to participate. You'll recall that we completed the initial consideration of all delegate selection plans at our February meeting. The Party Affairs team has worked closely with the small number of states whose plans remained in conditional compliance. And we're happy to share with you that as of this evening, 54 plans have been found in full compliance. Aaron, could you please share the list of the fully compliant states on the screen with us? Thank you, Aaron. There are 2 states not on the list. Alabama was provided a staff evaluation on February 29th, and we are awaiting resubmission of their delegate selection plan. Minnesota was provided a staff evaluation on July 31st, and we are awaiting resubmission of their delegate selection plan and completion of the staff evaluation. I'll turn it back over to Jim.
Thank you very much, Mignon. Through the Party Affairs Office, we continue to work with the remaining states to move their plans into full compliance. Party Affairs does this by regularly talking with state party leaders, assisting with edits as requested by the parties, and confirming delegate allocations and certifications. While this work has primarily been with the plans in some form of compliance, there has also been movement in our one non-compliant state, New Hampshire. Since our last meeting on February 1st, we have seen President Biden invest in an expansive campaign team in the Granite State, as well as confirmed that he views a future for the New Hampshire delegation as well. President Biden's vision is exactly what we've been saying since 2022, when we issued the waiver for New Hampshire to host their primary early on February 6th. At nearly every meeting, you've heard us say that we want to bring New Hampshire into full compliance. And that we want to see a convention that includes New Hampshire's full delegation, but only if they're selected through a process that is compliant with the DNC convention call, rules, and regulations. Developing a diverse early window that results in the strongest nominee possible and having a compliant and smooth process overall have always been the goals of this committee. We're grateful to all of you for investing your time and expertise in seeing this through. But the last piece we need to make this vision happen is not from the committee. It's a compliant plan from the New Hampshire Democratic Party. We need to know whether they also want to see a full New Hampshire delegation selected in line with our rules, which every other state has done. In any case, we have regularly discussed New Hampshire's pathway to seating a compliant delegation, but now the end of the primary window, which is June 11, is beginning to loom. We've discussed the timeline with party affairs, and in order for New Hampshire to update their plan and execute a smooth party-run process, they would need to begin planning in earnest next month. Therefore, Mignon and I intend to ask the New Hampshire Democratic Party to notify this committee of its intentions by no later than Thursday, April 11, 2024. They may not need the full 3 weeks, as this has been on the table for some time, but we would reasonably like to know by then. Following that deadline, we will meet on April 30th to hopefully review a compliant plan from the party. I am hopeful that the New Hampshire Democratic Party will thoughtfully consider this option over the next 3 weeks. And I know that as they do, there will be big considerations about things like funding, logistical needs, and their delegate allocations. Mignon and I have also been putting significant thought into figuring out how we can best support our shared goals with New Hampshire for this convention. We know that some of the barriers are financial and some are logistical. On the logistical point, Mignon and I have learned what it takes to run a successful party-run process very closely this cycle in places like Iowa and Missouri. And while it's certainly not a simple feat, roadmaps are there. Beyond the logistics, we've also heard from New Hampshire and others about the financial hurdles they face. This past cycle, the DNC invested over $350,000 in support of state parties that were unable to participate in state-run processes. We would consider New Hampshire in the same boat, and we have confirmed with the DNC leadership that they would similarly partially fund a party-run effort in New Hampshire. Furthermore, if the New Hampshire Democratic Party conducts a party-run process and notifies us of their intention to do so by April 11, then as co-chairs of the RBC, we would take the view that their entire delegation of 23 pledged delegates should be fully restored. At the end of the day, we all look forward to uniting as Democrats in Chicago to nominate the president, and we are honored to be part of the successful nomination process leading there. We hope by reducing obstacles and providing options for the New Hampshire Democratic Party to hold a compliant contest, that they will take the time to truly consider this option with us. And now I'd like to open the floor for discussion.
We have David McDonald.
Jim,
I take it the situation is if we get a compliant plan and the way in which they plan to do their party run process looks like it's in good faith and everything else, that we would then consider giving them back the delegates that have been automatically taken away, and that you and Mignon would be inclined to have us do that. But it's not just that they send in a compliant plan and okay, you've got your delegates back. There's a little bit more to it than that.
No, it comes back to this committee at our meeting, as I mentioned. Mignon and I would, under those circumstances, recommend restoring all their delegates. Remember that the reduction in their delegates so far has been automatic. It wasn't an action taken by this committee. It's an action taken when they took the actions they did under the rules. But we would recommend restoring all of their delegates if they submit a compliant plan, and then this committee can act on that.
Just want to be clear. Thanks.
Anyone else with any comments or questions?
Joanne Dutto.
Thank you. Thank you for that explanation, Jim. I do have a couple of questions. One is you're saying that you would like New Hampshire to have a compliant plan to be executed when? You're asking for a compliant plan and that work would have to begin in earnest next month. Are you talking about a plan for 2028?
No, we're talking about a plan for 2024. So
To be executed by when?
To be executed within the window, and I can state the exact date in a moment. June 11.
Yeah.
So what you're seeking is for New Hampshire to have a compliant plan to run a party run primary when we've already had the primary. I'm not sure what it accomplishes.
Well,
and we had a very successful, as you all are very well aware, successful outcome to the write-in campaign to renominate and have our president run again.
So Joanne, as you know, what we're asking for is a party run event that complies with the delegate selection rules.
By June
11.
Right now, we are fully shifting. I mean, all gears are focused on the general election, including, as you mentioned earlier in your remarks, that the president is actively setting up offices in and throughout New Hampshire. So we're in full tilt general election mode.
I understand that, I appreciate it, and I admire it, but I think there is this one item to be completed first, and that's trying to get a full New Hampshire delegation seated at the convention.
I don't even know how it is feasible. We're already talking the beginning of April for all intents and purposes. I mean, when I say in full general election mode, you know how New Hampshire is. It's all hands on deck right now. And this would require, it's not, well, it is the money, but just the resources, human and other, to do that, I think is really an unreasonable request.
So that's
it seems, I mean, it's just, there could be an alternative, and it's to acknowledge the historic effort of the write-in campaign, a grassroots campaign, I might add, that yielded over 125,000 votes.
Well, so this is why I mentioned a couple of examples of other states that have done this. Iowa has also completed a process in a very expeditious period of time. I did ask, and she did undertake, Veronica to ask for a discussion with your chair today. So we'd like to work on what the mechanics would be to do this and look at the examples from other states. So.
And Joanne, so you guys
But other states that have done it in 2 months,
Yeah.
April to May, May to June.
Yes, and the other states.
So
have done
who
this.
did it in 60 days? Which state did it in 60 days?
I think
I
Iowa turned it around pretty quickly. I don't know about 60 days, but they
Yeah, it
turned
wasn't
it.
60 days.
Yeah. Well, Scott's on, he can attest. But Joanne, you guys ran a pretty successful, somebody ran a pretty successful initiative to write Biden in. Are you suggesting that well, we probably need to talk to Ray, but are you suggesting that a beauty contest could not be done by June?
Well, you called what we had before a beauty contest, so I feel like mission accomplished. And it was overwhelmingly successful. But that process took longer than 60 days to pull together.
Well, I hope maybe you can join the discussion with Ray, and we'd like to try to help work out mechanics for this.
I would love to see it too, because, as you know, Representative Clyburn has been very supportive of seeing us move forward and seat the New Hampshire delegates.
I'm aware of that.
So, okay.
Okay, I believe Frank Leone has, thank you, Joanne, for those remarks, and I look forward to.
And thank you.
Oh, I look forward to continuing the discussion. Frank Leone raised his hand.
Yeah, I was a little surprised by Ms. Dodell's response, actually. I mean, the question is, what do you gain from this? Is you gain having your delegates seated at the convention. That's what you gain. And how do you get to there is something that obviously needs to be resolved, but there are a lot of smart people in New Hampshire and at the DNC, and there are a lot of options to consider, not only, and it wouldn't be another state-run primary. It would be a party-run primary, or it could be a party-run caucus. I mean, one thing that makes it much easier to do that sort of thing now is we are towards the end of the process with a presumptive nominee. And so I think obviously we have to observe all our rules, but it might well be possible to streamline a process that one could do in 60 days, building on, whatever New Hampshire has done, not the primary results, but other party activities. So I think it's a generous suggestion from DNC rules and bylaws, and I think there's a good possibility if people keep their minds open and try to be a little creative to get something that will seat New Hampshire fully and will comply with our rules. Thanks.
All right, thank you, Frank. I see Ken Martin has raised his hand.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, Madam Chair. I just wanted to rise to say I'm very sympathetic to Joanne's concerns here of just having 2 months to pull off a party-run process. And I think one thing that she said, which I hope people don't gloss over, is the fact that New Hampshire is a battleground state. They've already turned the corner and are focused in on this general election. Any time and attention taken away from that now really is wasted time, in my opinion. But put that aside for a second, and let's assume they could pull it off. The question I have for the chairs and anyone else who came up with this idea is, how do we prevent the mass independents and others from entering into this process, trying to embarrass the president late? Thanks to many folks on the ground who worked overtime to make sure that President Biden succeeded in a write-in campaign. This would be a really almost impossible thing to control the outcome in a way that I think we all would like, which is to see the president succeed. And I'm just very concerned that you're asking them to do the impossible, which is to pull off a party run process in 2 months, and also open it up to complete chicanery and gamesmanship by people who try to embarrass our president.
So Ken, I would point out that this is a discussion that's been going on for many weeks. It's not that it's just sprung full blown today. And I would also point out that in a party run process, Democratic Party registration could be required for participation. Anyone else with a comment or a question?
No other hands raised. Actually, Elaine has her hand.
Is the floor mine?
It is. Please go ahead.
Oh, okay, sorry. I think we need to put on the table, in addition to the, very valid concerns that have been expressed by Joanne and Ken before, there's a sort of bigger issue at stake here, which is if states defy party rules that have been duly adopted and then are simply seated anyway, this committee and these rules mean nothing. So what we are doing here is establishing a very important precedent that, in fact, the rules must be followed by the states, and the ultimate sanction is not to seat those delegates. If we do this, if we just sort of let this go by, etc., you've got a precedent for years and years and years where states are going to do just whatever they want to, and when the time comes, they're going to say, oh yeah, the Rules Committee will roll over and play dead. So unfortunately, there's something big at stake here, and I think we have to bear that in mind. And that's been the case ever since we first made these decisions. Thank you.
Thank you, Elaine. Any other comments or questions?
No other hands.
Seeing none, as I said, we will take this up again at our next meeting, but I hope that we will have some substantive discussion with Chairman Buckley and you, Joanne, and your colleagues between now and then. We can now move on to our next agenda item. We've asked our DNC counsel, Andy Levian, to provide an update on the challenges we discussed at our last meeting. Andy?
Thank you, Mr. Co-Chair. As discussed at our February meeting, this committee received 3 challenges regarding the implementation of states' delegate selection plans. Challenges from the Dean Phillips campaign against the Florida Democratic Party and the North Carolina Democratic Party, and a challenge from the Cenk Uygur campaign against the Florida Democratic Party. On March 14th, the campaigns withdrew their challenges. Therefore, at this time, we have no challenges pending before the committee.
Thank you, Andy. We'll now turn our attention to the substantive amendments. Substantive amendments are defined by Regulation 2.9 and refer to amendments that substantially alter a state's process after the plan has already been found in full compliance. Today, we have substantive amendments from Alaska and Puerto Rico, which are summarized in your meeting materials. We'll begin with Alaska. The State Executive Committee of the Alaska Democratic Party adopted an amendment amended delegate selection plan, which changes their first determining step from a party-run male primary on April 6th to a party-run in-person primary on April 13th at the party's State House District Organizational Caucuses. A summary of the amended plan is included in your materials, but for the purposes of discussion, I'll highlight several aspects for you. The party began amending their plan in January 2024 and formally voted to approve the amended plan on February 20th, 2024. President Biden and Congressman Phillips qualified for the ballot, but as only President Biden remains a candidate, caucus attendees will vote by voice to determine presidential preference rather than participate in a male primary. No changes were made to presidential filing requirements or voter registration deadlines, but the uncommitted option was removed from the ballot. Logistically, caucuses will be held in each of Alaska's 40 state house districts, with all districts offering a virtual attendance option. Since the caucuses will be held across the state, they will now allow remote communities, especially those off the road system, to participate. But before we begin our discussion, Alaska Democratic Party Chairman Mike Winthrop has joined us today to answer any questions you might have. I'd like to recognize the chair to offer any additional backgrounds. Chair?
Yeah, hi, thank you. My name is Mike Winstrup. I'm chair of the Alaska Democratic Party. With me today is Lindsay Kavanaugh, our executive director. First, I'll apologize for any background noise. I'm in the Seattle airport on my way to an NEA conference for my day job. But I wanted to thank the committee for considering our changes today. We had to modify our plan due to only 2 candidates qualifying for our primary ballot. In modifying our plan, we worked closely with both candidates at the time, though now we only have 1 candidate on the ballot. Nevertheless, we're committed to ensuring that all Alaska Democrats have a chance to participate in the process. And really, we're trying to do that by having all 40 districts will have a caucus with the virtual component where they will vote for the presidential nominee. With that, we're here to answer any questions you might have. Thank you.
Thank you. Do any members have questions for Chair Winthrop? Please raise your hand or chat Veronica if so.
There's a hand from Ken Martin.
Madam Chair, I'd like to move adoption of this amendment.
Okay. Well, I think I need to go back just a little bit before we do that, Ken, if you don't mind.
Sure.
Is there any other questions before?
No other hands raised.
Oh, Artie.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to say to the chairman, I was really glad to see of the savings that you'll be having to be able to use for your elections this year. So just wanted to say definitely in supportive of this amendment, and let's, hopefully you'll be able to get your wins that we need and save that congressional seat.
Thank you. Yes, we've got to re-elect Mary Patel.
Yes. So for the purposes of our discussion, I also want to note that Regulation 29B requires amendments to be approved by the state party and the RBC at least 35 days prior to the time the amendment would be implemented. For Alaska, we are currently 23 days from April 13th. While we recognize we are shy of the 35 days requested by the Regulation 29B, due to the date of the RBC meeting, we're also cognizant of the fact that the state party voted to approve these changes much earlier on February 20th, and the changes do not affect ballot access or filing deadlines. As we did in Hawaii last meeting, we are going to ask that you also vote to approve a waiver for Regulation 2.9B. So to begin our discussion, I'll ask for a motion to approve Alaska's substantive amendments and for a waiver for Regulation 229B, allowing for the amendments to be approved to be approved 23 rather than 35 days before implementation. If any member wishes to make a motion or a second, please unmute and do so now.
So moved.
Second.
Second.
We have a motion and second. The floor is open for discussion by members. Appears that
No other hands are raised.
Thank you. Seeing no further discussion, Chair will ask for a vote on the motion to approve Alaska's substantive amendments and a waiver for Regulation 29B. All those in favor of the motion and waiver, please unmute yourselves and say aye.
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 Those opposed, unmute yourself and say nay. Appears that the ayes have it. Thank you, Chairman, for joining us tonight.
Thank you.
Jim?
And John,
go
I
on.
think you're turning it back to me now. Thank you. We'll move to consideration of Puerto Rico's substantive amendments. As you will recall, this committee approved an amended delegate selection plan from Puerto Rico at our December meeting. That amended plan and the plan you'll consider tonight were both a result of the state party's response to requests from Puerto Rico's Financial Oversight and Management Board and State Commission on Elections to seek ways to reduce the cost of the primary. The Democratic Party of Puerto Rico sought to do so while still retaining a method for measuring the island's expression of presidential preference. A full summary of the amended plan is included in your materials, and Chair Rodriguez is here tonight to provide additional insight. But for purposes of discussion, I'll highlight the following. First of all, voting will be conducted in person on April 28 at a central polling place in San Juan and on the ancillary islands. Secondly, no excuse absentee mail voting is available to voters who requested a ballot by March 14. Thirdly, early voting is available to voters who requested it by March 9th. Fourthly, there is no change for the ballot access requirements for presidential candidates or district level delegate candidates who appear on the primary ballot. Before we begin discussing Puerto Rico's amendments, I'll recognize Democratic Party of Puerto Rico Chair Charles Rodriguez to provide some additional background on Puerto Rico's amendments. Chair?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Madam Chair, members of the committee. Thank you for considering our petition. And actually, we're very excited because tomorrow we have the visit of Kamala Harris, our vice president, will be in Puerto Rico tomorrow. So that's something really great for us. We need to amend our delegate selection plan because we are under pressure by the fiscal board that is the one in charge of the budget in Puerto Rico. And although they had approved initially $1.5 million for the primary in Puerto Rico, they have been since then insisting that we reduce more so when President Biden was able to achieve the threshold to guarantee his nomination. Also, voter turnout, we believe it's going to be a little bit low because usually people turn out when there's competition. And unfortunately, we don't have that now. Everyone here is supporting Biden, and we should have no problem in terms of getting the delegates for Biden. But at the same time, people sort of do not turn out to vote when they believe that it's already a done deal. Why turn out? So we'll be looking forward to have people turn out to vote, but that's why we're trying to limit it to limit the scope of the primary, but without putting any burden in terms of those who would like to turn out and vote and absentee ballot and so forth. Also in Puerto different from the states in the mainland and other states, Puerto Rico, the prison inmates have a right to vote. Therefore, we do provide for a polling at the different prisons for them to vote. And that will be taking place on April 26th. So that is not affected by the changes we are introducing today. So basically, we will have a pretty good primary, given the circumstances that we need to lower our cost, and at the same time, given the fact that there's no competition, although in the ballot we have three candidates, which is our president, Joe Biden, also Dean Phillips and Marion Williamson. So that is basically what we have, and we would like for you to support these amendments that we've introduced for your consideration.
Thank you, Chair Rodriguez. To begin our discussion, I'll ask for a motion to approve Puerto Rico's substantive amendments.
So moved.
Is there a second? Okay, we have a motion and a second in reverse order from last time. If any member wishes to comment or discuss, the floor is now open for discussion.
We don't have any hands.
So I'm going to ask all those in favor of this motion to unmute and say aye.
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 And all those opposed, please unmute and say nay. And the ayes clearly have it. Mignon, I'll turn it back to you.
Thanks, Jim. In addition to substantive amendments we just discussed, we also have one technical amendment to advise you of. Under Regulation 2.9, the co-chairs of the RBC are empowered to approve technical amendments and then advise the committee of the amendments so you may consider them. Technical amendments are changes that do not substantively change the delegate selection plan and do not impede participation in the process. We have approved one technical amendment since our last meeting. Oklahoma has amended their plan to provide additional time for presidential campaigns to exercise their right to review for standing committee members. The amendment moves the deadline for campaigns to submit their list of approved names from March 22nd to April 6th, following the selection of at-large delegates and alternates. The state party has communicated the amendment to the presidential campaign affected by this change. Any members have questions or wish to have the full committee consider Oklahoma's technical amendment?
Seeing no comments, Chair.
Seeing none, then I will turn this back over to Jim.
Thank you very much. Just give me a moment here to get back on track.
Jim, you came to the best part. This is the wrap up.
You're absolutely right. Yeah, and it moved a little more quickly than I expected. So this brings us to the end of our agenda as you are previewing, Mignon. Before we go, we do have a couple of housekeeping items. First, some work remains, so we've scheduled a virtual meeting for 6 p.m. on Tuesday, April 30. You'll get notices, but please save the date. 6 p.m. Tuesday, April 30. Looking down the road, the call states that any challenges pertaining to the delegate selection process that have not been resolved by June 24th move to the jurisdiction of the Rules and Bylaws Committee, from the jurisdiction of the Rules and Bylaws Committee to the jurisdiction of the Convention Credentials Committee. So that will potentially lighten our load a bit. However, while jurisdiction over challenges will move to the Credentials Committee on June 24th, the RBC retains jurisdiction over amendments to state delegate selection plans and compliance with equal division requirements. So we'll keep you all apprised of developments, but wanted to make sure you understood the timeline between now and the convention. Does anyone have any questions or announcements before we go?
See none, Chair. Oh, there's one from Frank.
Frank, go ahead.
Yes, sir. Quick question. My recollection was the only delegate selection plan that used ranked choice voting was Alaska's. And I understand with their new plan that they're not going to be using ranked choice voting. Just wanted to confirm that was the case.
Veronica?
I believe that is the case. Yes.
I believe it is also, yes.
Thank you.
And any other questions or comments?
No other hands, Chair.
Okay, thank you. So seeing no further questions, I want to give a big thank you to our parliamentarian Helen McFadden, and from our party affairs staff, Veronica Martinez-Roman, Aaron Buckley, and Rick Boylan. I'd also particularly like to thank Deputy Director John Mott, who has helped us navigate our myriad meetings this past year and our flood of documents. John will be leaving the party affairs team at the end of the month to return to the hard work of turning Texas blue, as he puts it. Thank you, John. It's been a great pleasure to work with you. Finally, we would also like to thank our DNC leadership, Sam Cornell, Mary Beth Cahill, and Nick Bauer, the Secretary's office, our DNC counsel, Andy Levine, as well as our court reporter, our ASL interpreter, and the team at Weymouth Watson for facilitating this virtual meeting. Thank you all, and without objection, this meeting is adjourned.